To my left here is Mr. Louis Bradfield. Louis is the founder and principal of Maridahdi Early Childhood Community Centres in Toowoomba. Maridahdi was originally a community kindergarten established in 1976 that transitioned to an independent school in 2006. Maridahdi, I did have to Google how to pronounce that, Louis, I'm sorry. It's a Swahili word meaning to embellish or to enhance. The name was chosen to reflect an ethos that positions children at the centre of all decision making. Maridahdi's Toowoomba site has enrolments of 85 children from kindergarten through to year 6, and Maridahdi is currently working with communities in Brisbane and Ipswich to add the Maridahdi approach to the educational landscapes. For over 35 years, Louis' work has been driven by his focus on advocating for children and their need to drive social change. His specific area of interest lies in the affective domain with his concerns about the current state of children's well-being. So first off, we have Mr. Louis Bradfield, the principal and founder of Maridahdi, talking to us about teachers being learners instead of just teachers.
So first of all, I did want to thank Liam for the opportunity. I did ask him, send him an email and question whether I was the right person for this. I'm not really. I think that our education system really needs a big overhaul. I think there is much work to be done. So getting platforms like this to ask the question, I think is, I'm pleased and I'm grateful. So thank you, Liam. Before I start too, I have a bit of a history of being a little blunt, occasionally swear, and a bit pointed. So I guess what I want to do is to make sure that my intention isn't to offend anybody in the audience. My work is about two things that I work on, and the first one is about advocating for children, so speaking on their behalf, because my greatest concern is children have no voice at all. That most spaces designed for children are just dominated by adults and what's right for them. And I think it's important to stress too, my background is early childhood, so a lot of my work over my 35-year career, early childhood trained, I've worked in preschools, kindergartens, I currently teach in a classroom which I'll talk about. I work with Year 3s currently, and next term I'm working with some prep-age students. So I guess that's who I'm speaking for. My concern is that they have no voice, and people are not really listening. And research and stats show that children are really under a lot of pressure. We're talking about high levels of anxiety, of depression really, in really quite young children. I mean, the stats too then translate to adolescents, where 1 in 4 of adolescent students will actually develop some sort of mental disorder or a problem. So I guess that's who I'm speaking for. And the second thing that I'm speaking about is, or to drive social change, and it's about two things. One is, I think that many have forgotten what childhood or what children look like. It's like they've just lost in the landscape. So, and I think to drive social change, we need to consider, and make decisions based on what life looks like for children currently. And I'm not trying to say there's something wrong with the way their life looks, but life looks different than it did 100 years ago when a lot of these systems were locked in for education. Parents are currently under more pressure than I've ever seen in my 35 years. And I think children are wearing that. And I do think parents are really, I think their best intention is there. I think they want what is best for their children. But I think that, I think as a society, I think we could do more to support parents within that domain of parenting. Because a lot of parents that come looking, and currently we have a lot of parents looking for something different. So they're clear they don't want what is on offer, but at the same time, they're not sure about what they do want. So you'll see that one of my interests is that still we use shame, even as a dominant way to keep children in their place, both as parents and as within education systems. And I think parents are themselves, based on their own experience, so badly want to do it differently but are not really sure how. And within that domain too, I think it's important to note that the latest brain research, there's a lot of research to support there are much better ways of doing what we currently do. So at Maridahdi, we work in teams, we teach in teams. We don't put just one single adult in a space. We have high adult-to-child ratios, 2 adults to 12 to 15 children at the most. And often if children have more needs than that, we'll put more adults in the space to support that. So I need to acknowledge those people who work with me. I'm not going to go into a lot of this, but it looks briefly at the key themes of Maridahdi, and Liam introduced some of those, the background and how long I've been doing it and how I basically left the system in disgust. Really, it's some of the simple things like how we speak to children and how we think that that's okay. I retreated to a community kindergarten in Toowoomba, started a design business, was going to do anything but teach, but somehow I've been sort of roped back in. And look, I do love what I do. I feel very fortunate to do what I do. The thing that I guess too within my work is that I think within the domain of innovation, which is what we're playing with, I don't think that within that education realm, I don't think we do that very well at all. You know, I think a lot of the research is almost, as someone, a colleague said to me, it's like we do research on killer whales in captivity. So a lot of the research on children actually happens within schools, and that dominant sort of paradigm is really so strong, and it's been such a tradition that it's really hard to bust out of that, and research shows that. But there's a few themes that I've listed there in terms of the work that I do. And one of them that Liam mentioned is this idea of well-being. And one of my biggest frustrations is that, yes, research is so on our side about this, but we have more conversations about organic food and whole foods and how do we get an egg to taste better and a chicken to taste better than we actually do about how do we prioritise children's well-being. And I think that that's a conversation we need to be having, because even if you look at the way that we start formal education, we start it far too young. Leading international nations don't start formal education until children are 7. And I think that's one of the things we're seeing, these climates where children are sat down at desks, and instructed at an early age, from an early age. By the way, guys, I'm not saying there are not people out there that are doing amazing things, by the way. I am making some generalizations and assumptions. So I'm not saying that there are not some amazing people out there. But my request today is I hope that, we can find more people to start playing in that domain. But again, the request at Maridahdi for anyone who enters is to actually become involved in that making and playing with and creating and looking for new ways of doing things. And we think we need three people or 3 groups of people to do that. We think children need to be part of that. We need adults, so both parents and teachers. And I think that's a point of difference about Maridahdi. We're actually not interested in parents coming to drop their child over the fence and for us to fix that child. And I think that's one of the problems we have. It's like education systems or educators have set themselves up as the experts. And I guess that I think something's lost in that. I think parents default and hand over that responsibility when I think they need to be walking with us. And I'm not talking about judging them on where they're at, but I'm talking about involving them as part of this exploring perhaps we could do this differently and how could we do that. Because again, as I said before, my concern not only is the pressure we place on parents, but a lot of people are also doing a lot of blaming and shaming of parents. And I think I think they're just struggling as well, and I think they need support and they need help to consider how they might do it differently. So when Liam sent me, and again I questioned whether I was the right person for the gig, I guess I'm interested in, because those people that survive this system, whether it be uni or within the first couple of years run away from teaching, I'm interested in those that run away. And I guess my request is, look, there's teachers out there and that construct of teachers, and we seem to be able to hand on that tradition of a teaching or to be a teacher quite well. I'm looking for those people that are leaving. I'm interested in them. I'm interested in why are they leaving. I'm interested in what they're seeing. And I hear those stories. Students come to us for PRAC. Some refuse to go other places because they feel that what's important to them is actually not embraced in schools, inverted commas. So I guess that's why I decided to come along. I'm interested in speaking to those people who are leaving and why are they leaving. Yes, if the gig is not for you, fine. I admire you for moving on and finding the right gig. But for those and the stories that I hear, that they are concerned about the work that is happening in some of these schools, that the work that they hear from universities is actually not being played out, which I think Liam touched on a bit as well. There's this huge divide between research and action, if you like. And I'm interested in that as much as Liam is. And so I want to speak to those people who, and I want to implore more people who do not like what they see. I want them to stay. I want them to almost get inside to White Ant, to actually be part of the resistance, to start to challenge, to question, to actually fight back and ask the questions. Yes, you need to play your game, unfortunately. If you want a PRAC report, unfortunately, you need to play the game for whoever is your PRAC supervisor. I get that. You need to get through your first year. You need to get through your second year. But don't lose yourself in that experience. Work out what it is about this that doesn't feel right for you. Work out, think about those things that you would like to play with and to do differently. And to store those away, to actually look for a way of keeping yourself sane, amongst, what I think is really, I don't think it is sustainable currently for children or for the teachers in the space. I think that, I'm speaking and I'm hoping that more of these people actually stay. And I guess my biggest concern, which is what that is about, is that we're asking children to almost leave their humanness at the gate. We're actually asking them to sit in these spaces that in no way reflect what or who they are or what children should be doing at the age of 5. And again, I'm talking about entry into prep school, which was the protagonist for Maridahdi to actually start. So in 2006, parents were quite concerned then about the shift from preschool into that prep age, when we were told it was to be play-based. And look, my experience and what I see and what I hear, there is not, people have even forgotten what play looks like. We're talking about a workbook and a worksheet culture that in no way needs to involve a teacher. I think it's disgusting, quite frankly. And I think that we sit 5-year-olds and endure and sit them down and we think that's okay. I actually have questions about that. So, that's humanness. And my concern is we're actually asking teachers to be in these spaces to almost dismiss their own humanness. And I'm talking about all of those things that are important to us as humans, feelings. What are we feeling and what are we needing? And I think that's something that we need to consider. 3 things that I think you could perhaps consider, and I think we ask those 3 things of everybody who enters into the Maridahdi space. So we're asking after a commitment, and I think we need that in terms of action. We need parents to come into the space, to be involved, whether it be on the governing council, to spend time in the space, to see and understand what their child's experiencing, what's happening for them, how they're thinking, how they work, how they learn, how they play. We're asking them to then, to show or to contribute. So to think about how they can add to that community that is Maridahdi. And the other thing, which is the third one there, is communicate. And I think that most adults suck at this badly. We're asking children to actually identify what they're feeling and to actually consider, what it is that they're needing. Well, we need adults to actually up the game, with that as well, because I think it could serve us all well. So they're the 3 things that I think as you navigate your way through this, potentially you could consider. I'm interested in this because the construct that worries me is that this whole construct of what a teacher looks like. It's like this tradition, and I think it's outdated, and I think it's time we moved on from that. And what I'm interested in is that construct of teachers as learners. Because at Maridahdi, I guess that's what we play with too. We play, and we get children to actually play with that tension between freedom and discipline every day. And we know that every child fits in a different place along that continuum. And how will they ever know unless they actually play with it? And one of the other key themes we play with is choice and freedom, and these children make decisions every day about how they want their day to look. So it's that culture of learning that I think is important. And before I finish, again, my concern is that schools are nothing but conditioning ponds where we reward compliance and pliability. And I'm not sure, again, that serves anybody very well at all. I mean, that's the history of schools and it's in that governance domain, but I think it's time we moved on from that. And again, I'm not saying all schools look like that, but my experience is that the current regimes, the dominance of NAPLAN, the dominance of, the workbook culture, this worksheet, this whole idea, this ACARA, mind you, I think I got excited about what they were considering. Mind you, I just read a politician actually looked like they've shut that down again, that right-wing conservative element. So I think it's time to question what schools do look like. I think what children are needing are connection, and I think that's what the latest brain research is showing us. And finally, you know, within that domain of well-being, I'm still interested that universities, that schools use the word behaviour management. That somehow children need to be managed is a great concern to me. It's such an old construct. And again, the concern that I mentioned before is that shame is a big part of that. And people say, oh, yes, we're not talking about adults here. We know that shame and guilt potentially serves us all well if we use reflection and personal reflection to think about how we might do things better. But when we're looking at the stress that young children are under, we're looking at a culture or a climate where these children, it doesn't matter what adults tell them about who they are or what they look like or how good they are. The reality is with shame is a child, and most children these days, under the pressure they're under, are actually making meaning about how they look as a learner. What they think, not what you think. So what's going on in their head, they learn to believe that about themselves at an early age. And that's concerning when you look at the stats. So I want you to have a think about it. So I guess my request is, you know, to get in there, to hang in there long enough. If you don't like what you see, then we need you to think, to hold on long enough to get through Teachers College, to find a space to start to play with, to innovate, to play with, to take a risk, and consider what do you need as a learner.
Thank you, Louis.